Shalom. Our Dvar Torah this week is being sponsored by Lisa and Leon Myers in memory of Lisa's father, the Gabbai and Bal Chesed, Saul Schechter, Azriel Asher Zelig ben Michal Halevi Zal, and is also being sponsored by the community-wide family of friends of Mara Kochba, Nechama Tzipora Bat Chana Zal. Thank you to all of Mara's friends, and thank you to Lisa Tenenbaum Myers for the dedication and for staying connected always with our community. May our learning together and connecting with one another be a schut, be a merit for their nishamot. A cranky, cantankerous congregant with atheistic leanings once asked his rabbi, do you honestly believe that Moshe spent 40 days and 40 nights on top of a mountain in a desert with no food or water? And the rabbi said, I really don't know, but when I get to heaven, I'll ask him. The congregant says, but suppose Moshe is not in heaven? Well, the rabbi says, then you ask him. Soon after leaving Egypt, and anxious that their leader Moshe would not return from his 40 days on Har Sinai, the Jewish people fashioned a golden calf, which is some form of idolatry. And it was a tragic national sin that took them from the heights of receiving the Torah to the depths of Avodah Zarah. And Rashi teaches us that there was one individual who went against the grain and tried to stop it all from happening, and his name was Chur. You may recall that Chur had been one of the two people, along with Aaron, who held up Moshe's arms in the war against Amalek. And when the Jews were clamoring to build the calf, Chur is the one who stood up. He protested, and he eventually made the ultimate sacrifice because he was killed by the mob. And the murder of Chur helps us understand the approach of Aaron, who seems to either facilitate the fashioning of the calf, and certainly doesn't try to stop it. And our defense for Aaron is that he was engaging in a stalling tactic, hoping Moshe would finally arrive. But secondly, he saw that Chur was killed for trying to stop it completely, so he figured he would take a different approach. Chur is a hero. Chur is a man who stood up for his convictions. But what became of his actions? He was tragically killed. It seems that Chur sacrificed his life in vain and nothing was accomplished. But there's a very important detail in our parsha that teaches us that this is not true and that his efforts were not in vain. Because the parsha also teaches us about the building of the Mishkan, which served as an atonement for the golden calf. And who is chosen to be the chief architect of the Mishkan? Who is filled with the godly spirit to lead perhaps the most important building project in history? It was a talented, extraordinary architect, Bitzalel. Who is Bitzalel? The pasuk says, Re'ei karati b'shem, Bitzalel ben Uri ben Chur, L'matei Yehuda. Bitzalel was none other than Chur's grandson, and he became who he was because he was raised in the home of Chur, which was infused with conviction. Bitzalel is selected to build the Mishkan not only as a reward for Chur's passion, but perhaps because Bitzalel was inspired by that passion. And when you see what one is willing to die for, which Bitzalel saw when Chur gave his life, it hits home what we really live for. If the Mishkan, then, is the atonement for the Egel, and Bitzalel came from Chur and built the Mishkan, you see that ultimately Chur was successful after all in preventing some of the damaging effects of the Egel. And we learn from here a powerful lesson, which is that what seems to be futile in the short term may very well have long-term results. Those who are able to hold on to the unpopular position may not be rewarded immediately, but the reward will be eternal. Chur was killed, but his efforts were not wasted. His grandson Bitzalel is inspired by Chur's passion to go ahead and build the Mishkan, which becomes the atonement for the golden calf. And the saying is that no good deed goes unpunished, but it's also true that no good deed is wasted, nor goes unrewarded. And every tefillah is never said in vain, even if we don't receive a favorable response to what we're praying for. The prayers get stored in the treasure house of sincere prayers, and it makes a difference eventually. That's certainly what we believe. Chur was killed, but through the notion of continuity, his impact lived on. And we're all searching for that sense of continuity, whether it's regarding our commitment to Israel or to Judaism and its values. We want to transmit our beautiful heritage to the next generation, because there's a tremendous power in you lighting Shabbat candles, as previous generations did, and then seeing future generations carry it forward. There's a tremendous feeling to putting on tefillin each day, like previous generations, and then to see it carried forward in the future. And the way to transmit it to the next generation is only if we have the passion of Chur. We're all role models for our friends, for our family members, certainly for the younger generation. They pick up on what we're passionate about and what we're going through the motions for. And so we will learn from here is to never despair. We don't even realize the impact of our actions, and we must live in a way that will impress upon the next generation what our values are. Because when they see a person with courage and passion, it leaves a lasting impression which is unimaginable to us. We don't even realize what impression it leaves. On the eve of Yom HaZikaron, around 10 years ago, at an annual event held at Binyanei HaOma in Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau told a story about Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal, that every day someone would drive Rabbi Auerbach from his home in Shaarei Chesed to his yeshiva in Beit Vegan, and the rabbi would occasionally ask the driver to pull up for a few moments outside Har Herzl, where he would recite Tehillim. And the cemetery at Har Herzl is, of course, the national cemetery in Israel, and it's also the military cemetery, which contains the graves of all the fallen soldiers of Tzahal over the years. And why did he stop at the side of the military cemetery of Har Herzl? And the answer can be found in another story told about Rosh Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that his students once approached Rav Auerbach and asked him that he needs to travel north to pray at the graves of the tzaddikim. Rosh Shlomo Zalman looked perplexed, but didn't immediately answer. Sensing hesitation from his rabbi, the student elaborated and explained he had some personal issues to think through, and he felt praying by the righteous would somehow help him. Rav Auerbach replied that he fully understood what the student wanted to do and why he wanted to do it, but he could not understand why we would travel 3 hours to pray by the graves of a few righteous people when there were thousands of righteous buried on Har Herzl, just 5 minutes from the yeshiva. The fallen soldiers of the IDF gave their life for Am Yisrael, like Chur did, but their mission lives on, and we're responsible to carry it forward. We need to take their passion and model it for the next generation. And so, when you go to take a drink of water, and you have a choice whether or not to say a bracha, keep in mind a little Betzalel or a big Betzalel might be watching. When you are approached by a poor person, and you have the choice whether to treat him kindly or to brush him off, remember, there are little Betzalels who might be watching. And when you come to daven in the shul, or wherever you might be davening, and you have a choice, whether to daven with kavana and how you give tefillah, there's a little Betzalel who's watching. And the question is, will our children want to build a Mishkan? Are we living a Judaism with the passion of Chur that will inspire the Betzalels of the next generation to build a Jewish home? Are we showing the sense of sacrifice that will convey the importance of the little Betzalels to build a Mishkan in their hearts? There were great generations in the past who sacrificed much for Yiddishkeit. Their commitment created the Jewish community of today. Let us make sure we take the baton, exhibit the passion necessary to create the Jewish community of tomorrow. Shabbat Shalom.